In today's video, we have the latest news and rumors from around the NHL. Today, we're looking at the latest trade talk on the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Calgary Flames, Edmonton Oilers, and the New York Islanders. We also have other news around the league, including a suspension in New Jersey, a fine in Philadelphia. We had a goalie goal last night with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and other news as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. Let's get started first with, we have a couple items from NHL player safety. Both these incidents come from the same game. It was Devils versus Flyers. Travis Konecny has been fined the maximum allowed in the CBA, which is $5,000 for cross-checking, which he did against Brendan Smith. And I guess, I'm not sure if you want to say fortunate or unfortunately, but Brendan Smith retaliated, turned around, and gave Konecny a pretty wicked two-handed slash. And that slash has given him a 2-game suspension. Apparently, word was that Brendan Smith started off his hearing talking about the reason why he slashed Konecny was because of the cross-check. They were all heading towards the bench for a line change on both sides, and Konecny came up behind Smith, kind of to the side actually, and cross-checked him in the back. But I think he got a lot in the arm was mostly where he got the bulk of it, I would think, but which can be a dangerous play. I mean, you could certainly hurt somebody quite badly because there's, it looked like it would be below the shoulder pad, so not like a padded area really. So ultimately, not a great look for Konecny, hence the fine. And then Smith, of course, retaliates with an even more vicious slash to Konecny. So both players will serve their time here. I guess Konecny's going to pay his fine, and Smith will serve 2 games. And for the Devils, they're also going to be without defenseman Dougie Hamilton. He's been placed on injured reserve. They've recalled Simon Nemec, so with a couple of defenders, that's Smith and Hamilton out, that's a good opportunity for Nemec to jump in and see what he can do there on the back end for the Devils. Of course, they've been playing better here as of late since they've been getting all their players back and getting healthier, which is good. And we'll see what they can do. Obviously, losing a couple of these players will be an important piece, so it'll be hard to see how they react. Another recall in Calgary, of course, after trading Nikita Zadorov yesterday. They've now recalled young defenseman Ilya Solovyov. Of course, Craig Conroy, when he was interviewed yesterday because the Flames played last night as well, during the first intermission, I believe it was, on Sportsnet, I saw an interview with Craig Conroy conducted by Ryan Leslie, and he was asked about, why now, why making the move, and he had made mention that they have younger players on this team that they want to get more opportunity to, and they felt now is a good time, based on the trade request from Zadorov previously, and based on where they were at as a team, that it was just a good time to move on and to be able to give a young defenseman that they really are keen on more opportunity. So this is the young defenseman he was referring to. He'll get a chance to come back. They're also without defenseman Oliver Shillington, who hasn't played in a really long time. He was skating today. Now I wonder how close he is. They didn't really give a timeline or anything of that nature. They said it was good that he was skating, but it's hard to say exactly when he's going to play. But I wonder if knowing that he's getting closer also made this trade a little bit more something that they should consider sooner than later. Anyways, there was also some concern where Zadorov wanted a trade and had got out publicly that he requested it, that it was kind of a bit of a distraction, a little bit of a minor issue in the locker room, and they just felt it was time to move on as soon as they were able to. So we'll see how the Flames make out in his absence and how he makes out in Vancouver. Those two teams are going to be playing each other here coming up this weekend, so obviously we won't take long to get Zadorov against his old club. We had a goalie goal last night, which is something you don't see very often. This will be the second one during the calendar year of 2023. Of course, Bruins goaltender Linus Ullmark also was able to accomplish this rare feat last February near the end of last season. So Tristan Jarry in Pittsburgh last night against the Tampa Bay Lightning with a 1-goal lead. The Lightning have the goalie out trying to see if they can get the game tied up. The puck comes down to Jarry, and it wouldn't call it a one-timer, but it was pretty close to it. Like, he got that shot off pretty quick. He had terrific elevation, lots of power on it, great aim, and there was no doubt, pretty much you could tell as soon as he released it, it had a great chance, and once it hit the ice, you knew it was going in. But for him to have that kind of power and elevation, phenomenal shot from Tristan Jarry, who's actually been playing better, certainly exceeding, I think, expectations. A lot of people, myself included, were certainly skeptical based on last year and the fact he come back and got the contract that he did. I wasn't sure if Dubas made the right move there, but so far, so good with Jarry. The big thing with him in the past is the ability to stay healthy, and then he does tend to have stretches when he's not as consistent, but a lot of that tends to be around his health. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes. But beautiful goal and great accomplishment. First Penguins goalie in franchise history to accomplish that rare feat that you see in the NHL, the goaltender goal. Now, we also seen, which is not, I don't think the interviews have been made public yet, but Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks are in Winnipeg. They don't play today. They play tomorrow. But he was doing a media scrum earlier, and I seen some reporters who had access to that scrum commenting on social media about it, saying that some Winnipeg media actually asked Bedard about the Corey Perry rumors. I was appalled when I seen this. Now, before I make too much of a judgment, I want to wait and hopefully hear the full context and response just to see. But based on what's been provided for quotes and in context online here, it kind of makes it sound like Bedard was fairly annoyed with the question, but he answered it. And it seemed like he gave a reasonable, good answer, saying that it certainly was affecting he and his family, no doubt, but he called it basically a bunch of bullshit on the internet, which is what it was. But why even bring this up? This kid is still 18 years old in his rookie season. Ask him a hockey-related question. Like, the answer is going to be that it was hard on his family, and it's a very, baseless rumor that was shot down by multiple places. Why are you bringing this up again? Like, leave the kid alone. Like, I can't believe. And it wasn't just one question, apparently. It's based on the reports that are coming out that it was a multitude of questions. I don't know if we'll get the footage of this later on or not, so we'll have a better idea of, who actually asked these questions. But I don't know. The Winnipeg media who were asking these questions, in my opinion, should be ashamed of themselves. Leave the kid alone, ask him some hockey questions, and move on with your day. Now, in the trade rumor section, we're looking at a variety of teams. Like I said, we've got Montreal, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Columbus, a few other teams here. Let's get started with Montreal, because we got the news earlier today that they've come to terms with goaltender Samuel Montembeault in a 3-year contract extension. Of course, we know the Montreal Canadiens are still carrying 3 goaltenders between Jake Allen, Montembeault, and Caden Primo. And we saw Caden Primo play last night against the Florida Panthers, and we've seen him get let up for 5 goals, all of which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I know I've seen majority of the game, I believe, if not at least 4, if not all of them, were glove side goals. I think the league has got the book on Primo and figured out the fact that that's certainly his weakness. And I believe, I think it's like 80% or 85%. It's a really high number anyway. Percentage of the goals he's let in this year are all the same sort of shots on the glove side. So certainly something he needs to work on, and certainly something that teams have targeted, no doubt. So the fact that Primo's coming off a poor performance last night and they come to terms with Montembeault today, it's raised a few questions. People wondering about the timing of it, but these negotiations have been ongoing for a while. So I don't think it's fair to assume that one poor performance leads directly to a contract for another goalie the next day. At the end of the day, Eric Engels of Sportsnet wrote a new article today talking about the extension of what it means for the 3 goalie system and the rotation and what this means for their futures. A couple of things to keep in mind. He thinks a Montembeault trade is very unlikely. We've seen him get mixed messages from different NHL insiders on that one, but he said that essentially Montembeault's new contract has no trade protection in it. So he could be traded, and they don't need consent to waive or anything on that front. So there's that. So they could technically still do it. Being traded with a contract is generally more valuable than being a pending UFA. So there's that to think about too. But at the same time, he's 27 years old. He's basically kind of coming into his prime, and he's arguably been the best goaltender out of the 3 that they have this year. Jake Allen, I don't think is too far behind, but he's rocking a .910 save percentage, which on a team that's lower in the standings, really not that bad. Montembeault's done fairly well for himself. So he figures that the most likely out of the three to move would be Jake Allen. He does have a very small, modified no trade. I think it's like 7 or 8 teams that he can block, so that doesn't leave very many that he would need to waive for. So ultimately, he's got this year and one more, though, at like $3.8 million. So that might be a little bit more challenging to move. That kind of money on a goaltender right now would be tough. I mean, you got Primo signed for another couple of years, but his contract is a lot less than $1 million. So from that perspective, the contract wouldn't be that difficult to move. The full amount can be buried in the minors and get cap relief. So I'm not sure what happens to Primo and Allen. Here's the question: is if he's right and Montembeault, they signed him with the full expectation to not trade him and to make him part of the future here for the next 3 years. Who goes between Allen and Primo? Does Primo get traded? Does Primo get put on waivers? Do they trade Jake? Like, how long are they going to keep up this 3-goalie system? Because I don't think it's really working for anybody. Engels made mention in his article that maybe Primo would actually play better and get more consistent if he had a more consistent workload. I do wonder if he could be right. Only playing once every so many days and what have you, probably tough to get in a good rhythm. But it's also pretty clear, in my opinion, based on, I think it's 5 games that he's appeared this year, I don't think Caden Primo is ready for full-time NHL duty. I really don't. So they can either, at this point, consider trying to put him on waivers and getting him through. But if they don't think that's going to happen, they either keep him or they trade him. I don't know. Or they consider trading Jake and they just, I guess, continue to deal with Primo's growing pains and let him be the backup for Montembeault. Let Montembeault play the bulk of the games with Primo backing up and developing and hopefully getting through some of the parts of his game that need work. Like I said, Jake's contract will be tougher to trade, but he's got a lot of value in the sense that he's 34 years old now. He's got a Stanley Cup on his name. He's been a starter. He's been part of a tandem. He's been a backup. He's kind of done it all in that sense. A lot of valuable experience that way. Let's see. Look what he's done for Montreal. They have had some tough years while he's been there, and he's provided some decent stability. So in any other team that's looking for that, he could be the guy. The problem now is the contract. Now, Montreal may not want to retain money where he's got more than just this year on the deal. So that might make it very complicated, and it's hard to say just how soon they're going to get out of this. But Engels feels Allen's the most likely to go. He'd have the most value. He's the oldest. But I don't know. I really wonder about Primo after last night's performance. Now, when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, we know that they were in on Nikita Zadorov and did not manage to get that trade done. The main thing was they needed the Flames to retain money, and the Flames were not keen on it. If they would have retained money, they would have got a better return. Some people were underwhelmed with a 3rd and a 5th round pick, but if you think about it and look at other defensemen that are anywhere from like a 4-5 defenseman, 4-5-6 defenseman, that's generally what they get. Like Elliot Friedman made mention of comparing him to the Luke Schenn trade at last year's deadline, and that's probably pretty reasonable and pretty fair. It was a 3rd round pick. So the fact that they get a little bit more than that, that's not that bad. Anybody who thinking Zadorov was going to generate a 1st rounder, probably a little bit delusional. That was not realistic at all, in my opinion. I mean, depending on the team, they could have taken back a contract, but the Flames didn't really want to do that. They have enough young talent internally that they're looking to create opportunities for, and they really value the cap space. They were in LTIR already. Now they're not. So in order for them to get out of that, trading Zadorov at full cap value was something that was preferred. At the end of the day, Toronto could have offered a bit more, but then if they need him to take a player and retain money, it's not really ideal. So they made the Vancouver offer a little bit more attractive. So that's why things went down. But it was believed that the Leafs were trying to acquire Zadorov and Chris Tanev, and it's believed that they're still going to keep pushing to try to acquire Tanev. Fair to say that out of all the pending UFAs that the Flames may move, Zadorov's probably going to bring back the lowest value. Chris Tanev, Elias Lindholm, probably going to give you, a better return. So you might want to do salary retention on one or both of those, and you only have so many slots you can do that with. So retaining on Zadorov wasn't ideal, wasn't preferred, and it wasn't necessary after Vancouver freed up the space to take on his full hit. So that makes sense. So it's expected that the Leafs are going to continue to push and try to figure out a way to acquire Chris Tanev. They're still very much in the mix there. There is word from Darren Dreger of TSN that they also kind of keep a close eye on Sean Walker in Philly, who's had a nice season so far, played above expectation. Could be a backup plan if for any reason Tanev doesn't quite work out in a trade. But the thing that the Leafs also like about Tanev is not only do they like his style of play and feel like he's a great fit and what kind of part of what's missing on that blue line right now, but of course he knows the GM well. He would know Giordano. There's obviously a small connection there, and he's a Toronto guy. They feel like they could probably talk to him about an extension and get him signed on a reasonable deal to not only play for this year's stretch run to the playoffs and see where they go, but to play beyond that for a few years. So ultimately, I think they like that possibility more than Zadorov. I think they would have taken them both if they could get them, but I think Tanev might be the preferred anyway. So ultimately, we'll see what happens, but look for the Leafs to continue pushing on the Zadorov front in that regard. I know the Islanders were another team in on Zadorov, but they were also in on Hanifin. It's believed, based on NHL reporters, Elliot Friedman, Frank Cervelli made mention of this as well, that it's believed the Islanders are still going to continue to push and see if they can figure something out on Hanifin. I know Elliot Friedman today on the Jeff Merrick show was talking about the Flames and what they might be looking for returns on some of these guys, talking about the Zadorov return. And it's not necessarily a case where they really want all future-based returns. So future picks or, prospects that are not even close to the NHL. He said they're quite interested as well in getting younger players that are maybe ready for at least a taste of the NHL. Like, for example, when they acquired Sharon Govich from New Jersey last offseason for Toffoli, that was attractive to them. Sharon Govich was a player in New Jersey who needed an offensive role and kind of got boxed out of one because of the depth that they created there with the Devils. He became expendable instead of playing a bottom six role. They were able to get him at a pretty decent price, of course, for moving a player into Foley who made it known he wasn't going to re-sign and would prefer to move on. So, Sharon Govich kind of fits the mold. Other players, maybe like an Oliver Wahlstrom in Long Island, could also be one of those types of players. Hasn't quite found his way yet in the NHL to find that consistency. I think if patients are running thin with them in the Islanders organization to find that, and if they need to upgrade their blue line, I'm not sure that's going to get it done for Calgary, but if they're talking to the Flames about Hanifin, I would think Wahlstrom almost certainly has to be involved. You're looking at other potential prospects or picks being added to that as well, of course. But Oliver Wahlstrom might be the kind of guy that they take a flyer on and, try to get that done. Of course, when it comes to Noah Hanifin, though, lots of talk as well about Boston being involved. Boston, like the Islanders, don't have the deepest prospect pool. I'm not sure what they'd be willing to put in the mix here, but certainly a team that's been long after this player. Don Sweeney and Cam Neely have been wanting Hanifin since he was drafted, and it wouldn't be shocking if they figure out a way to get it. If they could add Hanifin to that blue line, can you imagine just how deep that's going to be? Even cause the Bruins to make other moves. I mean, I know a player like Grzelcyk is likely expendable if they make other upgrades to their blue line. So it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out, but certainly lots of moving parts in Calgary. No big rush, but those are likely where some of these players are potentially heading based on the latest intel. And of course, the Oilers still heavily scouting Montreal and Columbus. Elliot Friedman was talking today that with the Jackets, it was probably a combination of not just goaltending when it comes to Montreal and Columbus, but some bottom six forwards as well. Maybe a blue liner. Of course, made mention that the Jackets have been looking to move a defenseman between Peak and Boqvist. They're likely going to move at least one of them. Spencer Martin is a potential goalie in Columbus to take a look at. And he wonders about some depth forwards that they might try to change their mix. It's believed if the Oilers want to change the mix in the bottom six, that Warren Fogle would probably be the player that they would most likely try to include, but that's difficult to say how that works out. At the end of the day, they do have some options. But when it comes to goaltending, like we mentioned, like in Montreal, Jake Allen appears to be the most likely guy to go right now, but that would be difficult for the Oilers to take on. I think there would be interest there. There was rumors before, but they'd have to move on from Campbell, and that's going to be tricky to do. I don't see Montreal wanting Campbell's contract unless they take it with the purpose of buying him out. Hard to say, but at the end of the day, the Habs could be involved with the Oilers too. But the thing with the Oilers is Elliot made mention, and I've talked about it as well, and we'll reiterate here, Jack Campbell in the last 3 games, and he's got another one coming up here on the weekend, has been really good in the American Hockey League. Before they make a trade for a goaltender, I have no doubt they will recall Campbell and give him another opportunity to see how things go. Obviously, Campbell was letting in a lot of soft goals that he should have had, but he was also not getting any scoring support either, made it that much worse. So we will see what they decide to do. I don't think if I'm the Oilers that I'd want to go into the playoffs if I can get there with Campbell and Skinner, but we'll just have to see what happens here. At the end of the day, Campbell is going to be recalled and given another chance before they pull off a big trade. I think that's probably the wise thing to do for them, and it makes a lot of sense. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But a guy like Jake Allen or Spencer Martin could be what they're looking at when it comes to the scouting that's been taking place between the Oilers and Habs and the Blue Jackets. So let me know all of your thoughts on today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.